Moadim Simcha Rabotai. We are continuing with our Mishna Yomi Masechet Kilayim. We're up to Perek Vav Mishnah Chet. We learned earlier in Mishnah Gimel that it is forbidden to plant other species beneath a grapevine. We also learned that it is forbidden to plant other species under a trellis, even under the parts that the vine is not yet growing on. Why? Because the owner considers it secondary to the grapevine, and therefore it becomes as if it's the grapevine. The Mishnah is going to continue discussing that topic from Mishnah number 3. Hakanim hayotzim min ha'aris, poles that stick out of a trellis. And the Mefarshim explain, again, if you could look at the diagram and the arts elucidated, it'll help. When we say here aris, we're referring to the actual trellis, which is the structure that is used to support the grapevines instead of the vines themselves. Now, the Mishnah is talking about a single grapevine. Some of the poles extend out horizontally from the roof of the trellis farther than you actually need it. So the Mishnah says, when you have poles that stick out of the trellis, which the grower does not want to ruin, so he did not cut them, literally means he had mercy on them, so he doesn't want to cut them. When he left the extra length of the pole, his intent was not to support the grapevines. He just didn't want to cut up the extra piece because he wanted to keep the poles whole. So the Mishnah says, Kenegdan mutar. It is permitted to plant other species beneath these poles. Why? Because since the poles are not there to serve the grapevine, they are not considered secondary to the grapevine, and they don't have the status of the grapevine. Therefore, you can plant other species beneath the sections where the grapevine is not actually growing. However, if he made them extending from the trellis because he wants the new growth of the vine to go over them, then it is forbidden to plant other species beneath these poles that stick out, even before the vines grow further. Why? Because since here he intends for the poles to serve the grapevine, the owner considers them secondary to the grapevine, therefore they have the same status as the grapevine, and therefore you cannot plant other species beneath them. That is in Rabbatai Mishnah Chet. Mishnah Tet now discusses it is asur to plant other species beneath the grapevine. The Mishnah is also going to include it now under the new growth of a vine. Haperach hayotze min ha'aris. Again, Rabbotai, if you can see the diagram, it'll help. Haperach hayotze min ha'aris. If the new growth of the grapevine of an aris extends from the trellis that's supporting it past the 4 work area of the aris, meaning you have a row of at least 5 vines that are trained on a trellis in order to be considered an aris. Other species are allowed to be planted within the 4 amot. Here you have a vine that grew past those 4 amot, a single vine that went past the 4 amot of the work area. The Mishnah says, we consider it, we imagine it as if a metal weight was hanging from the tip of the branch. And the Mefarshim explain that basically what we're referring to is a metal weight that's attached to the end of a line. When it hangs down, it hangs perfectly straight. Now, they usually use this metal weight that's attached to the end of the line. Builders usually use it in order to tell whether a wall was built straight. In our case, we're going to use an imaginary metal weight to determine the area that is directly below the new growth. So the Mishnah says, Kinegdo asur, it is asur to plant other species beneath that imaginary metal weight, meaning if you have seeds of another species that were planted directly beneath the branch, the grapes and the produce would become asur. You can plant in any other area as long as it's not within the work area, which again means 4 amot in the base of the vines. V'chen bedalit, likewise the Mishnah says the same applies to a single trained vine that's supported by posts. If you have the branch of the vine that grow beyond the vine's 6 tefach work area, like we learned earlier, it's only 6 tefachim, only the area directly beneath that branch is prohibited for planting. The area around it would be allowed. Now the Mishnah is going to conclude by discussing the law of a branch of a grapevine that's supported by another tree. If a person stretches the branch of a grapevine from one tree to another tree, it is forbidden to plant other species beneath that branch. The Mefarshim explain that you are allowed to plant in the area around the branch, as long as it's outside the vine's 6 tefach work area, but directly under the branch is asur. If the vine branch was not long enough to reach from the first tree to the second, and he extended it with the rope or with the reed, Tachat asipuk mutar, you are allowed to plant other species beneath the extension of rope or the reed. And the Mefarshim explain, the Mishnah concludes, if, however, he made the extension so that the new growth of the vine should grow over it, asur, in that case you are not allowed to plant other species beneath the extension. The Mefarshim explain like this: if you use the rope or the reed, as an extender to connect the branch to the other tree, that's considered significant on its own. It's not considered secondary. Therefore, you are allowed to plant other species beneath it. However, if the grower put the rope or the reed there to support the vine as it grows further, now the owner considers the reed or the rope secondary to the grapevine because it's serving the grapevine, therefore is considered like the poles of the previous Mishnah, and you would not be allowed to plant another species right beneath that extender. So it really depends on why the person's using it. Then it'll become secondary to the grapevine and be considered like the grapevine, or it'll be considered something on its own and not subordinate to the grapevine. That is the end of today's Mishnah. Baruch Adonai Le'olam. Amen v'amen.